Chapter 27 The Last Dragon Lord. Are you well, my lady? Elund asked, one bright, summer morning as the light and warmth spilled through the window and a happy breeze danced over the cloths and linens within. Morgana was sitting up in bed, knees bent and head down over them. She turned at Elund's words and looked at her guard. There had been a long gap between Tauren and Morgana's confrontation of Uther. But my father's death still makes no sense to me, Morgana confided in Elund. If he's your wisest captain and your dearest friend, why send him unequipped into battle? You now own land in Cornwall, my lady, Elund told her. It is very beautiful land there. Cornwall, where Gorlas was king, she told Morgana, remembering her time in Bayard's household going to what was the non-marriage of his daughter. And by the law you own this land. Morgana slowly raised her head. Cornwall, she repeated, is the land rugged, and is there a castle on a cliff there? King Mark's castle, lady, Elund told her. Tintagel. Aled, Morgana interjected quickly. I have seen this place, though I have never been there. For months a broken bar, for years a broken bar. I have seen thieves a broken bar. Tintagel. Because you have magic, Elund thought to herself. Then, aloud, told Morgana, King Mark invited all folk to Tristan and Innes's wedding. She lowered her head. Not all kingdoms kill magical folk. Morgana turned her head, and looked imploringly at Elund. No, in Mercia they do not. Wessex even is a capital city that was founded on a Briton capital. Many kingdoms tolerate, even embrace the ancient religions, and tried to find a way of merging the peoples. Elund took a few steps towards Morgana. Can I get help for you, my lady? Gwen, perhaps? Gaius? She watched Morgana consider this for a moment before shaking her head. The air is light, and the festival will be merry, Morgana told her, and waved her hand vaguely towards the window. How do you know this? About my father's land? Her voice came lower, rasping the words into the air, urgent and desperate. I was there, in Cornwall, Elund told her. And my friend who works in the library here, Enarin, he was with us. He is a Briton on Camelot who fell into Bayard's court with me. He is a great scholar, a fine one, and he read the land papers. He knows the history of the lands, my lady, and, if I may say so, is blessed so to be able to see the facts as he knows them, rather than be a king or a leader to proclaim some and deny others. Morgana seemed to consider this for a moment. Then she said, and is this Enarin going to be at the festival tonight? More than likely, Elund told her. It seems like all of Camelot is welcome. It is the end of summer festivities, and all of the surrounding villages will be here too, with goods and wares. Then I must do my best to represent my father, and King Uther, who did, after all, take me in when I became an orphan. Morgana's face brightened, and she looked about her rooms as if making a plan. And you, Elund, perhaps there will be someone there for you at this festival? She boxed Elund's upper arm, playfully. You thought that I was a boy and once joked about Aled and Enarin. Do you not remember, my lady? Morgana looked at her, and some more. Indeed a broken bar, yes a broken bar. She waved her hand as if moving something out of her way. Was that your broken bar? It seems so long ago. Broken bar. Elund stopped beside the lady, knowing her magic was there, knowing that the dreams of the night seemed to have developed into waking dreams. All since Kilgla had gone. I will be with the king today, Morgana told Elund. Once Gwen has dressed me, we will go to the hall. Then, and here her eyes took on the merriment of earlier, you will be free to enjoy the festivities. I believe there is a fighting tournament, and any number of things to amuse young people. 88,888,888. And so Elund made her way down to the guard room to see what Sir Hector wished of her. She did not wish to make much of festivities. Her mood was still low, and she still wished to be away from Camelot, though the thought of leaving was devastating to her. You will be joining the knights for the joust, Sir Hector told Elund as she made to dress in her guard uniform. Go to the armory, you are expected. Leon was there, as was Percival. Both knights were inspecting their armor. There were to be shows of arms and jousts, displays of mace and staff and short sword. When she pushed through they turned, before continuing to polish their armor. There is some you can use in the annex, Percival told her. "You'll have to polish it and it may not. A broken bar." He trailed off, looking at the front section of the beaten steel and Elun's torso. "It may need altering to fit you," he added, weakly. Leon, who had been buffing his leather boots, turned away and put his arm to his mouth, trying unsuccessfully not to snigger. "You're laughing at me, Sir Leon?" Elune asked, as she went to inspect the armor. "Might I remind you who fought the Wyvern and saved Prince Arthur? Who defended the castle against the ravages of the hunger we have just endured? Who, peace, Aeled?" laughed Sir Leon. "This is a happy day. King Arthur's father hosted a festival every year to coincide with the harvest and allow all the peoples of Camelot to come together. This has not happened in Arthur's lifetime." "Then why now?" Elune thought, as she looked out of the armory window, where banners and pennants and standards representing different noble lords began to be assembled. "I'll help you," Gawain told Elune, who had appeared through the door. "And I hope not to be opposing you today, for I value my life." 88,888,888. She was glad she had not gone to the tavern the night before. Gawain's words had mobilized a strength in Elune that Arthur had dimmed, almost crushed. She was in charge of herself, not the tyrant of a Cymric kingdom. Whatever Arthur would bring to Camelot, it had to be better than that of his father. "Look away," Elune told Gawain, in the annex as they were with the door closed. "This is a poor assemblage of metal, I must say." "You had better under Odin?" Gawain asked. "I had much better under Odin." He valued his mercenaries, for they were the muscle that brought home the spoils. "Look, will you?" She was down to the fine knitted breeches and close-fitting tunic that knights wore under their mail, and knew she would not be able to pull the leather straps tight enough herself for the armor to remain in place. "Will you put your hand on my stomach and do up the leathers?" Elune asked, at last, when she couldn't manage it. "That's why knights have knaves," Gawain told her. If he was registering her form under the undergarments, he did not show it. "Squires, I am anomaly," Elune told him, as he busied himself with the straps at her back. "I am here at the gift of the king because of my exile status, which is why I am." He pulled the strap tightly, and Elune gasped her last breath at the pressure, surprised. "I was called upon." "Be careful," Gawain told her, pulling Elune close to him. "I think there is something being planned. Be careful not to be a part of it. I would hate to lose my friend Arthur." He broke off as the annex door opened. The knights stood in the doorway, amusement on their lips. "You are meant to be helping the knight there, Sir Gawain, not giving him a loving embrace." Elune fought Gawain for dignity and sprang away from him. A roar of laughter came from all four of the knights, along with hoots and whistles. "Knights are meant to be pure of heart," Sir Ellen commented. "Nothing has ever been said about the rest of him," joked Percival. Elune stood, arms folded, glaring at them all. Then, she broke into laughter too. It was that sort of day, the one where summer could not make anything wrong, and the world turned with merriment and gaiety. If only she knew. 88,888,888. Thousands of people stood before the royal standings, where Arthur sat beside Arthur. Beside the king was Morgana in a radiant blue robe that matched the brightness of the sky. Elune too was in the standings with the rest of the knights, and looked about the people. So many happy people, eating and drinking, trading and betting. They were anticipating the day, as were the king's household, for nothing as grand as this had been held in decades. "My loyal people," Arthur began, addressing his kingdom. "Today I am humbled and honored to be your king. We have lived in peace for many years. I have negotiated treaties with our neighbors to keep us so. Looking at you now, I can see it was all worth it. I see you happy people. I see a prosperous people. I see young people who have never known war and shield wars, and death and devastation. I see prosperity." Arthur looked around at the people before him, assembled to get the best vantage point to hear their king speak. "So I say to you, on this day of hope and of festivities, share the bounty of the earth that you have worked so hard to harvest. Talk to your neighbors, rest and take joy in the entertainments. And for you all, now, I give to a broken bar the knights of Camelot." Arthur had briefed them. There would be 8 rounds, the knights splitting into two groups of three. Gawain and Leon were with Aeled, and Percival and Ellen were with Arthur. A standing joust followed a sword fight, and then came the battle with sword and shield, the sun as bright as a coin heated on a blacksmith's anvil to white hot, and it pressed against the sky, turning the knight's armor into a searing mirror as they began. The standing joust is an exercise in stubbornness. To stand upon a narrow plinth and receive the momentum of a charging opponent requires a specific type of biological denial. Percival was the first to demonstrate this. He stood like a coastal cliff, absorbing a blow that would have shattered a lesser man's ribs. He did not move. The law of inertia seemed, in his presence, to be merely a suggestion. Beside him, Ellen moved with a fluid, nervous energy, the spark to Percival's flint. Aeled, in turn, stood atop her plinth with a rigid, unnatural stillness. Arthur watched her. It was a look that lasted several seconds, too long for mere tactical observation, considering the silence that had grown between them, cold, crystalline, which had grown steadily as the days and weeks had passed. Since, in fact, he had come to the cells when his father had imprisoned her and assured her of his determination to keep Arthur from her. A crash of wood on wood. Arthur watched Elund, who did not look back until the very moment her opponent's lance splintered against her shield. Then, her eyes flickered to Arthur's. There was no warmth there, only a sharp, defiant spark of survival. She held her ground, her boots gripping the wood with a desperate tenacity. The final stage was the battle with sword and shield, a choreographed ballet of sparks and shouting on display to an audience where, between themselves, a grim struggle for oxygen and footing was taking place. Leon and Percival met with a sound like a ship's hull rending apart. It was a stalemate of the old world, and both were at an impasse, as skilled and battle-ready as ever they could be. The fight lasted long and was fought hard. Elund thought that Percival had the upper hand at one point until Leon hammered back across the bald grass, driving his co-knight almost into the crowd. It was a close one thing, but Leon finally yielded. Arthur called the start of the next, and it was to be a duel, Ellen and Arthur against Elund and Gawain. Her partner swung first, and kept up the momentum, fighting with a reckless, swashbuckling grace that felt almost insulting to the gravity of the occasion. He stayed close to Elund, his cape a flash of crimson, acting as a secondary shield for her. He was the only one who could make her smile, a quick, flickering thing that died the moment Arthur swung his path toward them, which did not go unnoticed by the prince, and the momentum continued, with Ellen and Arthur making their own gains for many scores of minutes, highly trained warriors at the peak of their expertise. Eventually, the tide of the melee pushed the others to the periphery, leaving Arthur and Elund in a private vacuum of conflict. Gawain retired back, as did Ellen, and they watched with the rest of Camelot as the two of them fought. Arthur's swordwork was heavy, punctuated by the grunts of a man who was using his weapon to vent months of unspoken frustration. Elund met him strike for strike, glancing at Gawain, which tempered her, reminding her of the course that she herself had sent Arthur on. The crowd cheered at the exquisite display of skill, although, closer up, there was a tragedy being played out in a manic rhythm. "You're fighting like a stranger," Arthur snapped, his voice muffled by his visor, yet vibrating with an almost boyish hurt. "I am a knight of Camelot, sire," she replied, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "As you made me." Elund narrowed her eyes. "Unless you mean Saxon." At this, Arthur charged at her, and they locked shields, the metal grinding with a shrill, protesting shriek. For a moment, the world stopped. Arthur looked into the narrow slit of her helmet, searching for the girl who had saved his life and to whom he had grown close to. Fight as if this really was Britain against Saxon. Elund stared back, her eyes wide and glistening with a mixture of sweat and something far more volatile. The distance between them was only inches, yet it felt like the vast, unreachable expanse between two different species. Arthur broke the lock first. He stepped back, his sword lowering just an inch, a lapse in judgment that would have cost him his life in a real war. Elund did not capitalize on it. She simply watched him, a solitary figure in the dust, before Gawain pivoted into the space between them, his laughter breaking the spell and returning the world to the bright, loud colors of the summer festival. 88,888,888. They had been lauded for their skill, and now the people were watching entertainment of a different sort. Court amusements, gesturing, juggling. Food was being brought out and the knights had been stood down and given time to themselves. She had gone to find Merlin, who had been with Arthur, for Morgana was to be in Arthur's company that night and she was free. Merlin, however, was not, and had congratulated Elund on her skill in the arena. "I'm leaving, Merlin," she told him. "I don't know when, but soon. Camelot is contraining the life out of me, and I need to be free of all of this prison which poses as a sanctuary." "Leaving?" Merlin asked. "To where?" Elund said nothing, for she had no answer to that question. Gawain had helped her realize it and she knew what she must do: find a lord she believed in and fight for him on her terms. Odin had been good enough, but she had not believed in the smash-and-grab mercenary tactics he employed. On paper, Camelot seemed ideal. Or, it would be, if Arthur were king, rather than Arthur. When Merlin pressed, "I don't know," Elund said. "Soon." "If I don't see you, then, Elund," Merlin urged. "Please, don't go." Elund finished. "What good am I here? Arthur's got his knight, his position a broken bar. He doesn't need me. Perhaps he needs me to be his enemy instead." "Elund, I'll find you, before I leave. If I can," she added, and began to walk away from her friend. And then there was an Aaron, who would probably die if his umbilical tie to the library were ever cut. She should say goodbye to him, too. Not before she had found some ale to drink, so she headed to the food stalls and, with her knightscape badge as privilege, scored a meat pie and a flagon of ale. "You deserve it." "After today," came a voice beside her. "Had we been in real combat, Arthur would have been dead after that mistake." Elund turned. Gawain was standing there in his red cape, looking profoundly uncomfortable in the formal attire of a knight of Camelot. He too had a pie and ale, and she nodded to his formal dress. "The rebel in a cape," she teased softly, leaning her elbows on the rampart beside him. "Same could be said of you," he retorted. "Does it itch?" "Horribly," Gawain admitted, a genuine, tired smile breaking across his face. "I only did it for him, and maybe a little for Merlin. They're the only things in this city who are genuine." "Or, why am I here?" "And for me?" Elund asked, her voice low, the alcohol prescient. Gawain turned to face her. The playful rogue was gone, replaced by the man who had seen the worst of the world and decided to keep fighting anyway. He knew she was still torn, still fighting her feelings for Arthur, still haunted by her father's threats. "I'm staying because I want to make sure you have someone to run with when this all goes belly up," he said. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, a gesture of solidarity at that moment that felt more intimate than a kiss. "Arthur has the crown in waiting, Elund. But I've got the road. If the walls ever start closing in too tight ... I'm gone to a broken bar. Come and find me." In that moment, they weren't knights or guards, they were fighters, two wanderers who had found a home in each other's rebellion. They went to the benches behind the food stands. A lot of people were still milling about, but it wasn't as busy as it had been a couple of hours earlier, and they chatted about Odin's kingdom, where they both had been once, both recounting tales of Aldred, who they had both known, the officious, dry-humoured. "What is between you and the prince?" Gawain asked Elund as the evening became darker when Leon, Percival and Delin had gone to seek their own amusements. "Nothing," Elund told him, holding out a cup of mead to her friend. "We could have been equals if I had been accepted by Bayard as his heir." "Equals, but enemies." "No, we're broken bar." Gawain trailed off. "The looks I see you give him are not those of a knight, of an equal." "Nothing," Elund repeated. "And that's the problem." A broken bar, Gawain paraphrased, guessing, erroneously, her meaning. "Can we stop talking about Arthur, please?" Elund asked. "I just want to drink this and listen to the music and escape this place in my head." 88,888,888. And the ale turned to mead and the food area turned to the open grounds where performers were playing music, and light filtered out of the sky. They found the rest of the knights, and sat together, displaying such amusements as friend or foe as the performers came out, and fight or bed, particularly when the dramas of the Mabinogon were played out, the actors in straw wigs as female parts or deities, such as the Gwynedd Winceridwyn. What about you, Aeled? Anyone you have your eye on? Leon asked, pushed on by alcohol and the spirit of the day. The Mabon is particularly to my liking, she told them, pointing to a skinny lad wearing an enormous fur, and in chains, representing the repression of the Celtic lands by invaders, and always being freed by loyal bands of warriors. Because you are Saxon? Asked Helen, insensitively. I am Cymric, Elune told him. The stories are as much mine as they are yours. And he's not a bad-looking lad, when all said and done. Then you should tell him, Ellen continued, egging her on. Then I will, Elune told them, getting unsteadily to her feet. Beside her, Gawain got up too, and took her arm. I think you need someone with some sense to go with you, then, he cautioned. Well, that rules you out then, Percival quipped. They all laughed, and Elune sat down again, Gawain beside her. It was only after the next story in the cycle that she realized he was holding her hand. Cheers went up around them as the play drew to a close, and it was then that Elune felt Gawain's hand on her chin and his face close to hers. She shuffled closer and leaned in, her lips on his. Gawain steadied the back of her head and she kissed him more, the pent-up repression of her feelings for Arthur crystallizing in that moment. Where it would have ended up, however, Elune did not know, and she gloried in his touch and the feel of his body beside hers, Gawain kissing her back as enthusiastically as she was kissing him, and they became lost in each other. Moments later, however, there were screams replacing the cheers of delight that had just surrounded them. Elune broke apart from Gawain and they got to their feet, swords unsteadily in hands, the knights that had been beside them now no longer there. The arena. He's burning them in the arena. The shrill voice filled the air, and panic overcame everyone. 88,888,888. An hour earlier, at sunset, Arthur had stood upon the high balcony of the wooden standing, Merlin at his shoulder and Morgana beside him. They were watching the players depict Blodeuwed, the girl conjured from flowers to be the wife of the king, as the merriment reached a crescendo of applause as the tableau of flowers filled the stage. All knew the story, and all were gratified by its retelling that night. He seems almost human today, Arthur remarked, nodding toward his father. Arthur sat upon the dais, a slight, terrifyingly thin smile touching his lips. Morgana, who had been quiet and compliant most of the day, nodded in agreement. It's the harvest, sire, Merlin replied, his voice small. Even kings need to eat. But then, after the play and the music and the night drawing in as a macabre backdrop to what was to come, it was Merlin who felt it first, that prickling at the base of the neck, the instinctive warning that the environment was shifting. The air, previously sweet with wood smoke and roasting meat, grew suddenly stagnant. The music, a rhythmic thrumming of lutes and pipes, faltering, a broken bar dying. Screams ripped across the grass plain that stood before the castle where the festivities had been taking place, chaos and confusion, and fighting and jostling. Gawain took Elune's hand and they ran towards the arena as the guards, Elune's colleagues, emerged from the gates of the citadel. They dragged with them several wooden crates, but as they reached the center of the square, the goods within were revealed to be human. Gareth, Elphice, screamed Elune, but her voice was drowned out over the melee and disquiet that was growing around the scene. From the royal box, Arthur looked on with satisfaction. There were 5 of them, 5 figures, who emerged from the crates. They did not look like monsters, they looked like the very people who had been trading in the stalls moments before, weather-beaten, tired, and profoundly afraid. For they huddled together, arms flailing in an attempt to protect themselves. But Elune's gaze was drawn back to the royal stands as Arthur himself got to his feet and began to address his people. Citizens of Camelot. Arthur's voice cut through the evening air, empty of the warmth he had blessed all of his citizens with an hour earlier. You see here the rot that would consume your yields, the blight that hides in the shadow of your homes. The spectacle was choreographed for maximum psychological impact. Wood had been brought to the arena and pyres lit, and the people were being pushed into them. A collective intake of breath took place. Screams blunting in the already bilious mass of energy from the screams and shouts and cries from the crowd. "It is for your protection," Arthur declared, his silhouette backlit by the rising orange glow, "to ensure that no magic persists in Camelot." Cleansed and secure. In the flickering light, Merlin looked at Arthur, and for a moment, the silence between them was the loudest thing in the kingdom. Elune looked at Gawain, looking to see if what she had witnessed had been witnessed by himself too. "Hurry, we are both going, are we not?" It could only be. A tyrant who burnt his people without trial was not where Elune intended to stay, and the road would be a nicer, safer place with Gawain beside her. They had got as far as the outer wall of the castle when the sky tore open, screaming the very heart of the earth over the horror that had befallen the festival. A whoosh of air tore over their heads and the confused, frightened crowd screamed once more as the elements of the universe crashed through. Only, it was not the old gods, vengeful at the cruel sacrifice Arthur had made, but something worse. Kilgara, the great dragon, filled the skies with golden scales and vengeful fire. He aimed first at the royal standings, his fire setting light to all of the wood as the people scattered. Then he took aim at the stone walls, which glowing orange as the beast laid waste to centuries of Pendragon pride. Elune dropped to her knees, the dragon's words screaming inside her head, words in a language she didn't understand, but could deduce were foul maledictions to Arthur Pendragon's name. The standing broke, and Arthur became trapped in its structure, black irony illustrating the soon fate of the cruel tyrant who had, just moments before, inflicted a similar fate on 5 Camelot citizens. "It's heading to the storehouses," screamed someone, which, Merlin considered, if this were true, meant starvation that winter, for that was where all of the country's grain now lay. Arthur remained incapacitated, leaving Arthur to lead a desperate defense against a foe that could not be killed by mortal steel. Below them, Gawain helped Elune to her feet and they ran towards the castle. "He's heading for the lower town," Arthur shouted over the roar of collapsing masonry, and he, Morgana and Merlin all ran off in that direction, the king calling to his son to free him. The knights had made it to the courtyard too, and were standing together to defend their city, to the end, if necessary. Arthur looked around, and then spied Elune, who stood amidst the chaos in her tattered civilian tunics, her face streaked with soot. Gawain was beside her, and they both stood with Percival, Leon and Ellen, and she glanced to him, resentment that had simmered between them since the near marriage drowning by the sheer scale of the catastrophe. "The knights can't stop him, Arthur," Elune said, her voice strained. "You know what Gaius said. Only a dragon lord can command him. And the last of them is dead, Elune." "Slain by my father's hand," Arthur countered, his eyes searching the sky for the next strike. "He's not," Merlin interrupted, his face pale with a secret he could no longer carry alone. "Balana lives. He's in the caves of Yalda. If we don't find him, Camelot will burn to ash." Arthur looked around them for a moment, and then made a decision. "Leon, step into my stead. Do what you can to avail us of the dragon." He looked at Elune, the proximity of her non-sword hand and Gawain's not lost on him. "Aled," he told Elune, using her warrior name, "come with me. If we cannot find these a broken bar nor a broken bar, then all will be lost." 88,888,888. The journey north was a frantic, bone-chilling ride. Elune rode at Arthur's flank, the distance between them closing in the shared face of annihilation. On the road, in the quiet of a cold camp, Arthur finally spoke the words he had redirected toward Gwen for weeks. Merlin had been left behind, and would pacify Kilgore as best as he could, he told her. He was the last Dragon Lord, Elune reminded Merlin. "Last but one. Balana is more powerful than I. Arthur's cruelty has brought the dragon, and Kilgore has left of his own accord. I can cajole him, but not command him while Balina lives. He touched Elun's arm. Does he still speak to you? His voice filled my very bones, but it was a language I didn't understand. Elune conceded. I chose not to go with him last time, perhaps I should now. But she hadn't meant it. Going on the road with Gawain as they had almost done, would likely have brought her to the same conclusion as she had known in her heart, only much later, that it was serving Camelot, under Arthur, where she needed to be. However, that had not stopped her from shivering with delight when Gawain took her away from the knights in what was now early the next morning, and finished the kiss they had begun. I thought I lost you to my father, he said, staring into the meager fire. And now I'm losing my kingdom to his insagacity. Elune looked at him, her usual acerbic defenses softened by the gravity of their mission. You're not losing anything yet, Pendragon. You're finding a way to fix what he has destroyed. That's what a king does. I'm not a king, Arthur whispered. You're the only one we've got, she replied. You will make the greatest king the Cymric have ever seen. You, with Gwen beside you, she added, wordlessly. Gwen filled her mind now, filled her heart, and she could support Arthur with integrity and with honor,